But the top of the news is all over the country. The top of the news is this shutdown, this government shutdown, and the shutdown seems to be provoked by Obamacare. Basically, the Republicans in the House of Representatives saying, if you don't, take a bite out of the butt of Obamacare, we're going to hold the country hostage and maybe take down the economy of the planet. It doesn't seem like a really good trade to me, and I'm not sure it's a really politically wise move for the Republicans. But Richard Viguerie is one of the most astute observers, particularly of the conservative world, a pioneer of political direct mail. He's the head of chairman of conservativeheadquarters.com, conservativehq.com, excuse me. And Richard Viguerie, welcome back to the program.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Tom.
Thank you. You wrote a piece about Obamacare being the new Panama Canal for conservatives. Can you explain that?
Yeah, Tom, I was active very much so back in those days. Our company was doing a lot of marketing for conservative causes, and starting around 1975, 76, 77, the conservative movement was trying to get born. We really were a pretty small group then.
This was kind of post-Nixon.
Post-Nixon, and really before Reagan's presidential race. He ran, of course, in 76, but 75, we were trying to launch the conservative movement, and it just really put us into kind of warp speed. The Panama Canal, my own company, we mailed tens of millions of letters in opposition to the giveaway of the Panama Canal, and of course, many other groups, organizations did the same.
Now, if I could just set this up a little bit for our listeners who might be under 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever, who might not remember, the United States built the Panama Canal and basically owned it by lease it was 100 years, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. And at the end of that 100 years, it reverted back to Panama. That was the lease. It was just like Hong Kong reverting back to China after 100 years. England or Great Britain had won it during the Opium Wars, and now it's gone back to China. The Panama Canal was going to go back to Panama. And so the guys... Your guys, the conservatives, were saying, we shouldn't let that happen, and it was going to happen right smack dab in the middle of Jimmy Carter's presidency. We shouldn't give away the Panama Canal. And then there were others, I was among them, who were saying, why do we want to hang on to the Panama Canal anyway? It's Panama's, isn't it? And there was a huge debate about it, and you're right. It polarized America, and it really helped build the conservative movement. Go ahead.
And also, Tom, a very real possibility that this issue, the Panama Canal issue, was the one issue above maybe everything else that propelled Reagan into the White House. Conservatives were not all on board with not giving the Panama Canal away, much as they are divided right now. For example, Bill Buckley and Ronald Reagan debated publicly the giveaway. Bill Buckley was on the side of Jimmy Carter on this one here. Right. So there was some division among conservatives. But the grassroots, back in the mid-'70s, just as now, they're all pretty much the grassroots opposed to Obamacare. So it's an issue that kind of
conservative grassroots
then, and it divided the Republican Party. Then Howard Baker, the minority leader there in the Senate, and Hugh Scott and other establishment Republicans supported Jimmy Carter in the Panama Canal issue. And so it was a very similar fight, what was going on in the mid-'70s, what's going on right now. And this Obamacare issue, I think, is really, if any one issue launched the Tea Party, I think it's fair to say this would have been the issue. And it certainly was the number one issue in the Republicans' victories in 2010. And conservatives are expecting that this will propel them on to more victories in 2014.
That's fascinating, because,
we do want to nationalize the election. Conservatives, I'll just quickly say, Tom, we almost never win elections unless they're nationalized. Democrats are a deliverer of services. They'll fix your pothole, get your Social Security check to you, et cetera. And Republicans are more big picture. We'll stop, give away the Panama Canal, protect the country from the communist, law and order, that type of thing. Right. And if we can nationalize this election in 2014, as we did in 2010, 1980, 1984, 1994, before, we've got a good chance of having a good year electorally.
It's a very interesting analysis, and I don't disagree with it. But if I can critique it, and
Please.
Feel free to rebut me, giving away the Panama Canal was really not that big a deal. We ultimately gave it away. It hasn't hurt our nation. The Panama Canal is still working just fine. And in fact, they're digging a new one, and so so it was sort of one of those made up issues. And I'd suggest that much sturm and drang about something that was relatively nothing. And I would suggest that this thing around Obamacare is not that dissimilar. I think there's probably a better parallel to Ronald Reagan in the 60s sending out that 33 LP that the AMA financed, saying that someday America is going to look back and talk about when the land was free before Medicare got passed, and there was this huge battle by conservatives for Medicare. Medicare got passed. It was very popular, and at that point, it might have brought the conservative movement together for a while, but it also fractured them because a lot of those conservatives ended up going on Medicare. Don't you think that that's a more possible outcome? I mean, the Panama Canal was more of an abstraction. Well, Obamacare is something you can sign up for.
Tom, I will certainly agree with you that the Panama Canal issue was not the most important issue to the survival of Western civilization. But you don't always get to choose, what issues you fight.
Sure.
They're presented to you, so you take them and you make the best of it that you can. Sometimes, other issues on the social issues. Prayer in school was a big issue back in the 1960s. It was important, but
Richard, if I could, pardon my interrupting you, but we only have about a minute and a half left.
Okay.
I want to get this in. It seemed to me that the Tea Party movement, most of the anger that was expressed in the Tea Party movement was people who were really, really angry at the banksters who brought down this country. Why don't the conservatives pick that up and push? Taft-Hartley was a conservative idea. Push re-regulating the banks.
Well, I know some liberals like to think that our anger was at the big banks. Yeah, certainly big banks played a role in our economic problems recently, but big government played a far, far, far greater role. And Obamacare is a different issue than anything we've seen come along before because it does tax people. It does take from
so did
young
Medicare.
And transfer it to the elderly.
So did Medicare and so did Social Security, and all three were called socialism at the time.
Well, that may be true, but this is one that's going to happen at one point in time. You're going to see an enormous amount of money taken out of your pocket and transferred to others against your will. And and also, Tom, keep this in mind: the media is different. There was only a handful of microphones back in the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Right.
Now with the
there was no Fox News
media. We've got an opportunity to sell our story in a way we didn't before.
I think you're absolutely right, Richard Biggery. And you've got Fox News and you've got the right-wing echo chamber on radio going for you. Yep. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Thanks for your insights.
Always a pleasure, Tom.
Richard Biggery, the legendary conservative strategist. conservativehq.com.